Hello friends, it's Kristie Marcotte. I'm guest designing for Pink & Main using their August 2019 Crafty Courtyard kit. The theme is fruit salad and I just love the vibrant summer colors. This is a monthly kit, so quantities are limited. Kits do tend to sell out very quickly, so if you're interested in this kit, I suggest not waiting. I have included a direct link in the description box if you are interested in purchasing this kit. So let's go ahead and get started with my cards. For my first card, I'm using a sketch from Cards TV. This is number 26, and I will be making 2 of every card, and all but one set of them will be identical. So you're only going to see me make 1 of those cards just to save on time. And I do apologize if I sound rushed in my voiceover. It's summertime, so quiet time in the house is really limited. My craft room doesn't have a door, so I do have to kind of kick out the children and the husband in order to record a voiceover. I selected one of the plaid design papers for the background of the card, and then for these little 4-inch squares that go along the bottom of the sketch, I'm actually cutting those into small banners, and I'm going to layer them just slightly on top of each other just to add a little extra interest. And then I'm using this bright pink to add all of these matted layers. The kit does include 1 sheet of this color cardstock, and then I did include several more just because I use quite a few layers on all of my cards. And then using that same pink cardstock, I cut out this reverse scallop circle die cut. This is by Pink & Main, and then I'm just adding some white pearlescent paper behind there. So that's where I'm going to add the image to my card. But before I start working on the image, I'm going to go ahead and stamp my sentiment. And just so I want to make sure I get a good impression, I'm going to use my mini MISTI, and this sentiment is the berry best. Super sweet. I'll generally only stamp my sentiment directly on pattern paper if it's not a super busy design. So even though this one isn't exactly a tone-on-tone, it's still a fairly muted paper, so you can still see that sentiment. So then I went and chose this ombre pink pattern paper that's included in the kit and stamped some of these strawberries. And then I also used some green cardstock and stamped just the top part of the strawberry. So I'm just gonna fussy cut all of those out, and I'm actually cutting them right to the edge of that stamp line. And I decided not to cut off that top part of the pink paper where it would be the leaf of the strawberry. So instead, I'm just going to lay that green cardstock piece on top. That way I don't have to try to get them exactly perfect and piece them together. So once I have those all cut out, I'm just going to take a black marker and run it along the edge of all of those pieces. That way if I didn't get it cut directly to the edge, you can just cover it up using that black marker. This is also helpful if that edge of the paper is white, just like the pattern paper, then you can just cover that up using the black marker. So now I'll just use some liquid adhesive and attach that green part of the strawberry, the little leafy part. And then I'll put some liquid adhesive on the bottom of one of the strawberries, so that one's going to lay flat on the card. And then the other, I'm just going to use some thin foam squares and pop it up slightly. And then just to finish off this card, I'm going to use some of the gems that are included in the kit. And even though these are self-adhesive, I am going to use some extra liquid glue just to make sure they're not going to fall off on my card later. And then just a finishing touch, I just put a thin scrap of the pattern paper on the inside of the card just for some added decoration. So there is card number 1 and 2. So now moving on to my next card design, I'm using Sweet Sunday sketch number 264. I selected another one of the plaid pattern papers, and I'm going to cut this diagonal strip on the bottom of it. So one side's going to be 3 inches and then the other is going to be 4. So I just took a ruler and did a little mark and then took my scissors and met those 2 together. You could use your paper trimmer as well if you're not sure that you'll get a nice straight cut. For the bottom part of the background of the card, I chose some of the cardstock that's included in the kit that has this pre-embossed little polka dots all over it. Really pretty. And then you can see there is a scallop circle cut out of the very back layer. Well, I will be using that later on in the card. It's just a great way to save on cardstock, especially if you don't have a lot of that one specific color. So I'm going to add some of the twine that's included in the kit. There's two different colors. There's just a solid pink, and then there's the pink and white striped. So I chose the pink and white stripe. Just did 2 rows across the card, and then I'm just adhering the ends to the back of the card using some score tape. And then I'll just thread a little piece of that twine for later on. I'm going to tie a little bow. But right now I'm going to work on the image of the card, and for this one I'm going to add a little lemon. So first I'm going to stamp the outline of the lemon. And if you love to color, the images on this stamp set are perfect for that. So there's a lot of different fruit choices, and you could color them in with whatever medium you prefer. But if you don't want to color, there's also the option of using the inside pieces. So right here is the inside of the lemon, and you could just use some colored ink, stamp that. It definitely helps to have a MISTI or a stamp positioning tool. And now I'll do the leaf just using some green ink. And the pieces were really easy to line up. I didn't have to fuss with them at all, and I got a nice clean image. There's not like a lot of that extra yellow outside of the stamp line or the green, so it was really simple to use. So now I'm going to go ahead and pop that up using some foam dimensional tape, and it's going to go right over that twine. So I don't want that extra little bump from the twine. So I do just lay a piece of the foam tape on each side of the twine, and then just a small piece on that outside edge. That way it's nice and even on the card. And then for my bow, I just tied a knot, and then I unfrayed the ends of the twine. It's an easy way to do kind of a fake bow. So then I went ahead and stamped a sentiment, and I'm just putting it on some white cardstock, layered that with more of this pink cardstock. And then just a final touch, I'm going to use some of the yellow sequins that are included in the kit, and I just put 3 of them in that upper left-hand corner. So lots of fun. I really love the bright colors on this card. And again, I did make 2 of the same card. And I do want to mention, if you are interested in any of the sketches that I use, including the measurements, I do share all of that information on my coordinating blog post, and that link is in the description box below. So now moving on to my next card design. This is Sketch Saturday number 532. For the background of the card, I selected this beautiful pattern paper that kind of looks like half of the rainbow colors. It has the pink, the orange, all the way through the yellow. And then for that thin piece in the background, I'm just using some more of that embossed pink cardstock. So for this card, I am going to make a shaker card. I used one of Pink & Main's reverse scallop square dies, so that'll be the frame of the shaker. And I'm just going to put some score tape all along the edges, and then I'll adhere the piece of acetate. So the kit does include a half sheet of acetate, so that's really nice. I got a little bit over the edge, so I just trimmed that off real quick. And now I'm going to build up that little shaker window. So I take a piece of the foam tape, fold it in half, that way I have the nice perfect thickness for all of those little shaker toppings to move around in the card. And then I'll just cut those thin pieces to go all around that frame. And this die has very thin edges, so I had to make sure to get it really small pieces. It's probably about 1/8 of an inch wide. So I make sure to get all of the foam pieces touching to the next one, a nice tight fit, because I don't want any of the sequins or the little fruit toppings that I'm going to put in here coming out at all. That would just be so sad for the recipient to receive this little shaker card, and they start shaking it and the fruit all comes out. So I'll just put a little bit of anti-static powder inside, especially along the edges, to take away a little bit of that adhesive. I'll start off with some of the yellow sequins, and then I'll add this fun mix of these fruit toppings that are included in the kit. I love these, they're so cute. And then to seal all of those toppings in place, I just put a square piece of white pearlescent paper on the back. And I want to make sure this shaker piece doesn't fall off my card, so I am using some score tape to adhere it in place. So So once I get that pressed on nice and firm, I'm going to go ahead and add the sentiment. And I am taking the chance and stamping it directly on the card. I used the So Sweet of You sentiment. And then just a finishing touch, I put a small banner in that upper left-hand corner, and then also 3 of the gems right below that shaker box. So for this card, I chose all in the orange color, and I just used 2 of the bigger ones and then a smaller one in the middle. And again, holding those in place with some extra liquid adhesive. So there is my finished card, and I just love all of these little shaker goodies. So you can get a better look at all of those little shaker toppings in my still photo. So now moving on to the next card design, I used Mojo Monday sketch number 466. For the background, I chose this fun rainbow diagonal stripe paper, and then also just a thin piece of some green polka dot paper. And then for this larger rectangle, I'm going to use a bunch of the different fruit stamps. So I didn't show the actual stamping of most of them. I did the outline and then also just that main fruit color. So now I'll go ahead and do just the final color. This does take a little bit of time, but it's definitely worth it because they turn out so cute. Most of the ink colors I'm using here are by Pink & Main, and they coordinate really nicely with the pattern paper. So once again, it was really useful to have my mini MISTI so that I could re-ink all of those stamps so I could get a nice solid impression. If you have a really good eye and can line up all those stamps, you definitely don't need a MISTI. So now that I have all of those filled in, I love the beautiful colors. I'm just gonna layer that on some more of this pink cardstock. As you can see, I did use quite a bit of the extra pink cardstock, so it was good that I had some on hand. So now I'm going to add those thin banners on the left-hand side, and I just selected some more of the cardstock that's included in the kit. Just cut some small fishtails on the very ends of those, and then I'm going to adhere the two together just with a thin piece of score tape. And the only reason I'm doing this is I'm going to add a little something extra on these little banners. So first I'm going to pop a couple of holes in there because I'm going to use some little mini gold brads, and then also these tiny little tassels that are included in the kit. So if you have some small brads, they fit perfectly through that little loop on the tassel. So I'm just putting 2 of those on the banner. It's one a little higher than the other and a little staggered off slightly. And I thought they just looked so cute with all of the other rainbow colors on this card. I'm just using a couple pieces of foam dimensional tape on the top of these little banners and then just some score tape. I just want to make sure this piece stays in place. So I'll adhere that down, and I had thought about putting a sentiment on the front of the card, but I changed my mind. I felt there was already enough going on, so I just stamped one on the inside of the card and then added that little pattern paper piece. And then just a finishing touch, I'm going to use some of the Nuvo glitter drops. This is the white blizzard color, and just sprinkling those all around the fruit just to add that little touch of glitter. So there is my finished card, and I did make 2 using this design. So now moving on to my next card. For this card, I'm not using a sketch at all, and overall the card is very simple, but I just love it. For the background paper, I'm using this kind of a sunburst design with the white and the blue, and I also pulled out some of this holographic paper that was in Pink & Main's July kit. I still had half a sheet left, and I did not want to waste it, and it just looked perfect with this card. So even though you only see that 1/8 of an inch around the outside, it has this beautiful rainbow look to it. And I still had just a tiny bit of the paper left, so I just cut about 1/4 of an inch piece just to put on the bottom of the card, and I adhered that using some score tape. And then using one of the dies in the kit, I stamped this high sentiment, and this is included in the welcome gift for the very first time that you subscribe to Pink & Main's kits. I love this little set. It has a hi, hello, and a hey, I believe. And I just did a quick coloring using a blue Copic marker. Then I pop that up using some foam dimensional tape and then just add that thin strip of the pattern paper on the inside of the card. And then using up the very last scraps of this beautiful paper, I used the 3 heart dies that are included in the kit, cut out 1 of each, and then I'm just adhering them with some liquid adhesive in that upper left-hand corner. Just one final touch, I put just a small drop of the Nuvo glitter drops on both sides of the sentiment. So there are my finished cards. I really love how this one turned out. So now moving on to my next card, again using a card sketch. This is Mojo Monday number 503. This card is very, very vibrant, but I absolutely love the chevron paper with the yellow and the white, green, and red. It's very summery, and even though there isn't a drop of pink on it, this is actually one of my favorite cards in the whole set. So I layered all of that with some red cardstock, cut out that large matted circle with the green cardstock. So then I stamped a random pattern of the watermelon on some white cardstock. I'm using a stitched circle die to cut those out. And I did do most of that stamping ahead of time. But again, I just used some of the red and the green ink. None of this was colored, it was all with just the inks. So I have a scalloped circle. This is another one that's included in the kit, and I've just stamped my sentiment right on there. I'm going to pop that up using some of the foam dimension. And then I cut out a couple of banners in red and then also in the green. And this is another pink and Maine die, and I'm just cutting them a little bit shorter. The green is going to be just slightly shorter than the red, and I'm just going to layer those in that upper right-hand corner. And just to make sure they stay in place, I'm just adhering them using some small pieces of score tape. And then just a finishing touch, I'm going to use some more of the gems that are included in the kit. And this time I'm just going to use the green. So I'll put 2 of them in that upper left-hand corner and then just 1 next to the sentiment. So there is my finished card, and I just love how this one turned out. But do let me know which card is your favorite this time. So now moving on to my next card. I used Reverse Confetti sketch number 5. For the background, I have this tone-on-tone blue paper, and then I'm going to use this busier paper with all these little triangles for that main rectangle in the center of the card. I've already gone ahead and stamped my sentiment using some blue ink. And I'm just going to layer all of this using some blue cardstock. And the sketch has 3 of those circles on the right-hand side, but I'm going to change that a bit and just do 2 of them. So first I'm going to get all of the main pieces of the card put together, and I did start to put this card front onto the card base, and then I remembered I wanted to add some twine to the top, so I'm glad I caught myself before I adhered that in place. So this time I wrapped that, just the solid pink twine around the card, just 2 pieces again, and then I'll adhere the ends using some score tape. And then just using another piece of the twine, I just wrapped it underneath the other 2 pieces so I could tie a little bow. So now I'm going to do the little images for my card. I used some more of this pink cardstock, cut out some stitched circle die cuts, and I'm going to heat emboss the strawberries using the primary marshmallow embossing powder that's included in the kit. And it does make this beautiful soft pink color, but I decided to do it on the pink paper instead, and it almost makes it look more like a clear embossing powder. But I love the subtlety of this image. I stamped the strawberries using some Versamark ink, and I first pre-treated that paper using some anti-static powder, and now I'm just using my heat tool to set that embossing powder. So it doesn't show a whole lot on the video, but it does have a very beautiful shiny look on the card. Now I'm just going to use some foam dimensional tape on the upper portion and the lower portion, the part where the circle is hanging off of that white strip, and then I'll use some thinner dimensional tape on the other portion just to keep it nice and even on the card. So then just a finishing touch, I'm going to use just the smallest size of the yellow sequins, and I'm just putting 3 of them on the left side near the sentiment. So I'll just adhere those in place using some liquid adhesive. And I try to get them nice and straight, so I always start with the one in the middle first and then work my way out. So there is my finished card. I love the bright, cheerful colors on this card. So now moving on to my final set of cards. I used Sweet Sunday sketch number 211. And this card is super orange, but it's really fun. The background paper is some ombre pattern paper, and then I have some orange chevron paper that I used a rectangle stitch die to cut out. Layering all of this in some of the orange cardstock that's included in the kit. And then I also used a stitched circle die to cut out this kind of geometric pattern paper in that orange. That's just going to go right behind the sentiment strip. And since the right hand side of it goes off of those layers, I didn't want it to sag at all, so I'm just adding a small piece of cardstock right underneath that. So I'm going to go ahead and stamp my sentiment. I'm using the Squeeze the Day sentiment again. For this card, I'm going to use the orange fruit. Probably made sense since everything else is orange on this card. So I'm going to show you all of the stamping for this particular card. So first I'm going to do the outline. Then I'll go ahead and clean off my stamp real quick with my chamois. Then I'll go ahead and pull out the other 2 pieces. Well, actually there's going to be another 3 pieces for this one. I'll do that outer circle first, using some of Pink and Main's orange ink. And again, I will stamp this just a couple of times just to get a nice solid impression. Clean that off, and then I'll do that inner circle. So same thing again, I'll stamp that just a few times to get a nice solid impression. And like I said before, these line up really easily. So it's not a lot of air going outside of the lines. So then the final one are all the little slices of the orange. So that one's a little harder to line up. Mine was off just slightly, but it's not very noticeable. And I did pull in a darker orange ink just so it showed a little bit more. Then I cut that out using a circle die. Let's go ahead and layer my sentiment strip on some of that orange cardstock. Adhere that to my card. And then I'll just use some liquid adhesive to adhere that orange image right onto the card next to the sentiment. And then just some finishing touches. I'm going to use some more of the gems that are included in the kit. I'm going to use just the orange color. Like I said, this card is very orange. I'm using 2 different sizes. And then I decided at the last minute just to add a couple of the yellow sequins. Although they don't really stand out as like a bright yellow, but since some of that pattern paper has just a hint of yellow on the bottom, I think it worked out fine. And again, I did make 2 cards, but since I didn't have enough of the orange paper, I did a strawberry card instead. Still think it turned out super cute, and I made it the exact same way. So now here's just a quick recap of the 16 cards I made using Pink and Main's August 2019 Crafty Courtyard kit. I love these colors. They are just so bright and cheerful, perfect for summer. And this was so fun to get all of these beautiful images without actually coloring, since I just use a bunch of different inks. And again, this is a monthly kit, so they do tend to sell out very quickly. If you are interested in purchasing the kit, I have provided a link in the description box. Pink and Main does require a 3-month subscription, but I have loved every single kit that I've used of theirs so far. Thank you so much for watching, and I hope you have a wonderful day.